The Constitutional Court unanimously decided to uphold President Yoon's impeachment, effective immediately on Friday when the verdict was announced. He was removed from office and lost presidential privileges. Now, while the country will need to move quickly for a snap election within 60 days, we take a moment this morning to review the court's ruling and, I think more importantly, proposed reasoning and further implications. For this, we're now joined by Professor Byung-joo of the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Good morning, Professor Kim.
Good morning.
Maybe we can preface this conversation with the implication of the verdict. First off, where do we begin defining what the Constitutional Court's ruling signifies?
In classes that I've been teaching about Korean politics for international students as well as Korean students, I've been emphasizing the long tradition of Korea for the last about, let's say, 70 years, people power. First, that started with the people's uprising against the Lee Seung-man government, ending his own government. And since then, several dictatorial regimes that all ended with the uprising of the people. And even before this one, even the ending of Park Geun-hye administration, continuously united people rising up against the political power, and that has been tradition of Korea all along. But this time, the significance of this case is it lies in a difference. Difference is the country was divided. It was not a totally united, people united, but it was rather a divided country. Not necessarily half and half, but let's say 7-3, 6-4.
Right.
There was different numbers. And this time, what's different is not that united people rose up to fight against the political power, but it was divided people accepting the rule of the institution,
right,
rule of the system, even though they do not necessarily agree with this decision, but accepting it and upholding the unity of the system itself. I think that really matters because democracy, it's ruled by the people, and it's whether we like it or not, is run by majoritarian rule. And through the majoritarian rule, we set up rules and principles, and we have to go by those rules and principles. And this time we showed that. And of course, this is not the only single and only time that we did this, but the fact that it has been coming in the way as a continuation of this kind of people accepting the rules is even more, encouraging. Because remember, President Yoon was elected with the margin of less than 1%,
right.
0.73%. And when he entered the office, we were all telling him there was a national expectation for the new president at the time, that he would unify the country. Right. He would embrace both sides and hold the nation together. And this time he failed to do so. And for that reason, he has been removed. But in removal of his presidency, I think people showed once again, just like we did in last presidential election, this time again, we showed that this country is a nation where people will respect the principles and rules and rule of law and the system and institutions.
Despite the ideological divide, that is still evident in the country, respectful of the decision that the Constitutional Court had to make. I was in Yeouido when the verdict was being announced for my different job. And frankly, when I arrived, I was a little bit fearful. One, I thought I might be late. Two, because so many police officers were mobilized, I thought, is it in fear that the worst might happen? And that didn't. And I think that's a really important signal.
Yeah.
Professor Kim, we mentioned in the headlines that the New York Times noted that the rise and fall of Yoon Suk-yeol exposed a vulnerability in Korean democracy, but also its resilience. Can we take a look at the external reaction, looking back at international reactions to Friday's ruling and its aftermath? What have we seen so far?
Well, yes. Talking about international reaction, you mentioned New York Times. It's a major newspaper of the United States, and the United States is not a country that can talk about stability of democracy
Yeah.
of other countries.
Right.
Sad reality at this point, and that discourages all of us. But starting off from the other reactions from the United States, I noticed people saying that they are very envious of what they call K impeachment, the system where they can actually drive out the president who do not reflect the will of the people. And they were all applying this idea of, I guess they're not Trump supporters, but these U.S. citizens who are saying all these things of, we wish we can do the same here, and we are envious of Korean system where people can rise up and remove people from the power. Uh, and so that's with some cynicism, I guess, and joke and
Right.
stuff like that. But
Of
but I
course.
think the feeling of envy on that side of the political spectrum was very sincere indeed. And that Korea has a system where they can remove people in power who violates rules and principles and so on. So I thought that was a very noted reaction from the United States, from the people of the United States. We also noted reaction from China. Interestingly, we know China is not a country of democracy, but the citizens, they were in their own internet, they were putting up, Korean democracy as a search word, and Korean impeachment. And at one time they said this case of, presidential impeachment in Korea topped their search list. So a high level of intention, indeed, extremely high level of attention to what was happening in Korea. And there were some people who were posting messages to congratulate Korea for achieving this. And some people were saying power of democracy is important. And I thought that was very, noticeable coming from the Chinese public, indeed. And some, with some cynicism and joke, they were saying Korean presidency is one of the most undesirable jobs in terms of what you have to face at the
That's
end of its
that's
term.
very painful to take, but
Right,
that's very
right,
dark.
right. But
That's the
they're
truth.
not. I don't think they're making really totally downplay. Making.
I don't think they're just
Uh,
making jokes. I don't think
yeah,
so,
yeah. It
right?
was
Because
it
there's some
was
truth in there, right?
a well-intended joke, so I don't think we
Right,
should take it any negatively at
right,
all.
right.
But more than anything, through these reactions,
But ouch.
ouch. And through these reactions, I think Korea made a difference in terms of in the minds of the Chinese people, that actually people's ability to change political leadership is indeed important. In some countries like Korea, it takes place and people can do so. And I think it gave hope to some of the Chinese who have different future in their minds for their political system. Japan's case, they're paying very close attention as well, and real time news headlines were showing step by step different points being announced by the Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court here in Korea. They were reporting it online as well as on air, live, and they were talking a lot about the future stability or instability of Korea-Japan relations and so on. In Europe, Economist magazine recognized that Korea's institution of democracy has marked a big victory indeed, and there were a high level of attention as well in other media outlets in the UK as well, or for this case. So the world has noticed that Korea made a big achievement in a way in this case of a presidential impeachment.
It's interesting because at home, it doesn't really feel that way with the snap election that needs to happen within 60 days. I mean, the political circles have to move fast. But if you take a step back, I think you get a view of some of these important elements that we're noting this morning.
Right.
As you've rightfully brought up, Professor Kim, it has been repeatedly said that it was a winning moment for the public, showing Korea's people power in play once again. But beyond that, can we also look back at maybe specifically who really made this possible?
Yes, yes. In the verdict, the text of the verdict, the Chief Justice was reading for 22 minutes. There was a one point that really hit me hard. It's a very impressive point. In his reading of the text, he recognized Korea's police and military in acting passively to of the president, they helped indeed Korea restore democracy. So I thought that was a very impressive point. And I was talking about this with some of the students from the developing world, and they were saying, oh, in our countries, police and military, they always have to act on behalf of the people in power, and sometimes they have to crush and kill people
Right.
here. And they were impressed that in Korea, they showed otherwise, and they thought there was a real sign of advancement and advanced democracy, where people who controls the means of violence could actually act based upon the rules
Right.
rather than necessarily the command
orders.
that's coming from the
Right.
top. So that was an important point. Second thing is, in terms of who made the difference, uh, the Constitutional Court. Going into the final verdict, there were speculations about how the court will be divided, but I don't think anyone was seriously predicting that there will be unanimous
Oh,
ruling.
right.
All eight judges taking one side,
Right.
unanimous ruling, and I think that's something that needs to be praised big time, because there's some of the conservative judges who were appointed by President Yoon and by People Power Party. I'm sure as a person, as people, as just natural human beings, they must have been afraid of the consequences
Of course.
before the fact. If they take the side with the impeachment, what will be the personal consequences outside of the court? But they were not afraid, and they were courageous enough to take side with the majority. And when with the impeachment, I think there was a wonderful case of social elite doing their job and fulfilling their responsibility. And I think it's all the more admirable, because of that reason. Lastly, conservative media here in Korea, Korean media landscape, conservative media and the progressive media, they all play politics. They think they're political forces and they fight all the time. But this time, for different reasons, conservative media going into the final verdict, they were saying, no matter what the outcome will be, we have to accept the outcome. And they really played out big time. And as a result of it, as soon as the verdict was handed down, there's nothing that the conservative side could do anything in a major way, and they had to accept the final verdict. So, in that sense, whatever the intention was, the final result was the conservative media was doing their job for the first time in a long time. So those are the entities and players in this scene that I think made a real difference in terms of making this big achievement possible.
No matter how difficult making that important decision.
Right.
Professor Kim, the verdict was 114 pages long and written in accessible, clear language as if to address the public directly, knowing perhaps what is at stakes and how much of the public was very much involved, deeply involved with the verdict. What can we say about the text of the verdict that the acting Chief Justice Moon Young-bae read?
I think it's one of the best texts of any kind I've ever seen in Korean history, in my short experience, I guess. But when I was listening to the reading of the Chief Justice, a little bit joke on the side, perhaps. For those of us who do these things on radio broadcasting, I don't think its verbal delivery was one of the best ones.
I needed a moment of relief. Thank you for that. He's also human too. I think sometimes we forget.
Yeah. He sounded like the ordinary citizen, so it feels like just what we call in Korean expression, uncle next door. This just sounded like not like top Chief Justice, but
Right.
I like them. I like the way he delivered it. It's very down to earth, and actually that point is really important, down to earth, because if you read the text and if you were listening to the text,
You could follow it.
you are surprised by how easy it is to follow it.
Right.
And the thing is, this is not easy for on their side, these judges, because, those of us who work in different professions, like doctors, even professors in classes, there are jargons. Jargons exist for easier communication, professional communication. And it's a lot easier to communicate in jargons. And it's very difficult to leave and get out of your professional world and come up with a communication that can connect the people easily. It's extremely difficult work.
Right.
And that's why often in court rulings and stuff, you read Korean text, but you wonder whether it's Korean text. You have no idea what these words mean.
Yeah.
Seriously, that's what's happening. And this time, I can see some people are wondering, why did they take it so long to come up with this verdict if this is unanimous verdict? I guess, different speculations are possible. Maybe they worked hard to make it unanimous, but one of the possibility is they really worked on this text to make it easier for the public to follow, to understand. So in that sense, it was the most fantastic work in a way. And there's a famous saying in graduate school educations that I liked very much, but not well shared in the academia. But one of the most prominent professors that I know said, if you don't understand what you're reading, you shouldn't read it because they didn't know what they're saying.
If you can't explain it simply, then maybe you haven't understood it enough. I mean,
Exactly. So don't waste your time on complicated reading. So it was a big belief, what do you call it, relief
right.
for graduate student at the time. But the thing is, for professionals, producing a communication that's easy to understand for the public is extremely hard work, and they did it. They achieved this time. So if you look into the text, they start off whether this ruling case court review of this case is legal and established, well-founded or not. And they talk about why they have to review the case, why they have to accept the case. And every single sentence that they're making were plain text. All the words were plain words, the nouns and everything, something we could understand immediately. And the second part, they try to show why actually Constitution has been violated by President Yoon, one by one. His action of announcing the martial law, and then how he tried to stop the National Assembly from passing the nullification of the martial law, and how he his action of sending troops inside the National Assembly. And the announcement of impeachment, announcement of the martial law itself, restricting political activities and so on, and what he did towards the National Election Commission and the different political figures and judges and so on, all violated Constitution, and it was so easy to understand.
Right.
And at the end, they didn't just end with a legal review, but at the end, they produced a wonderful sentences summarizing what the nature of politics, what the work, responsibility of politics is indeed. In doing so, the judges of Constitutional Court, they went over the fact that indeed, the National Assembly, controlled by the opposition party, did egregious things, terrible things, to harm the function of the government. They recognized that, which was a key point of President Yoon's announcement of, martial law.
Right.
And then they went on saying, despite the terrible things that National Assembly did, it was still the job of the president to unify the nation, hold the country together, and to resolve these things to political means. And that is the nature of politics. That's the work of politics. Instead, he wanted to impose the means of violence to control this situation. And that's a violation of Constitution. And I think that point was so well stated and made such a good sense.
Right.
It was just a wonderful, wonderful work. So, for those of us who have not yet seen the text or listened to the full announcement, the full reading of the document, I think as a citizen of Korea, the nation of democracy, we should all read this verdict text indeed.
Because it's very purposely written in accessible, clear language, as you rightfully pointed out. I thought it was also impressive the court went on to suggest what the president could have done to address the DP
Right.
And I thought that was very impressive as well.
Mm-hmm.
We're quickly running out of time, so I really want to get to this final question this morning. This is the second time a sitting president was impeached in Korea. We have confirmed, not just today, Professor Kim, but several times that this is a sign that Korea's democracy is working. Now, more than ever before, many of us are now then contemplating, how do we ensure it continues to work properly in the long run? What can you add to this point?
Yeah, with the limited time, I just want to emphasize the point that I emphasized before, and in a slightly different way. This case has proven that we are the owner of this democracy. Korean people are the owner of Korea's democracy. And think about what ownership means, and think about running the system. In business, they're owners and they're managers. And politicians are our managers. Media is our managers. They are supposed to run the system on behalf of us. And in doing so, we have to keep in mind the principles of ownership. That is, we change managers when needed. If we just take one side forever, constantly on one side only, you're not an owner. You're just dragged around by the manager. It's a system turned upside down. So we have to keep in mind that we are willing to change side. We are willing to replace our managers based on their performance. And we will never be sticking to just one side no matter what. So if you happen to find yourself saying, we have to get rid of the other side because they're evil, then you're not an owner. You don't qualify as an owner, true owner of Korean democracy. Rather, you have to be ready to choose either conservative or progressive based on the performance of serving us, how they serve us well or not. As the true master of the system, we have to be willing to take side and switch side each time.
I think it takes a great deal of humility to be able to say that I play for this side, but my team's leadership was wrong this time. But I think you raised a really important point as we move forward. Professor Kim, thank you so much for your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.